dark veil and silver lining. A true conscience in its perilous peregrinations is masked in a dark veil, but its silver lining is unveiled, rendering true cognizance to sundry facets of the society. The street was dimly lit. She felt it was the right time for her to venture out to purchase groceries. As she took quick and short steps along the butcher shops that lined the market's adjacent street, she covered her nose with her pallu. Nevertheless, it would inadvertently work out to her advantage. She could even conceal her embarrassment in her pallu. As she approached the market, she noticed that the cemented pavements reserved for selling agricultural produce in the public market were encroached upon completely with homogeneous-looking bamboo baskets, leaving little room for the vendors to sit and transact with their customers. "It's congested everywhere, just like roads," she sulked. The arms of the weighing scales looked as though they were made a scapegoat in a tug-of-war between vegetables and weights. A seesaw-style tug-of-war. Ironically, the side which would stoop to a low level would be the winner. After the contest ended, the scales were put down with a metallic-sounding thud, and they lay there, knackered with their iron chains spreading higgledy-piggledy, trying their best to hang on to the basket. Again, the masculine weights were forced to proclaim their victory on the scales' paper-thin, white-hued arm plates, just like a victorious wrestler would pin down his opponent to a count of 3. Vegetables, especially the ones with a smooth skin, like tomatoes and bottle gourds, looked plastic, which left her in a dilemma to be purchasing them because of her fanfare towards organic products. After a host of plastic impostors posing themselves as edibles had entered the omnivorous market, she thought it was now the turn of impostors like plastic vegetables to be making inroads. "Bhaiya, these days tomatoes too have started becoming plastic. I hope they are the original ones, but they certainly don't look like it," she said. He grinned from ear to ear, which made his pointy ears escalate before they retreated to their anatomically correct position. She analyzed the vegetables with a hawk eye to make sure they were morally bound to render themselves to her dietary health and satisfy her penchant for buying organic. He started to weigh them out. "Ma'am, these are fresh ones, and that is why they look impeccable. I get them from a local farmer just outside the city. These are much better, unlike the ones that you find at the big stores, where they are waxed and made to look lustrous." As she scouted along the street, she could feel the mushiness of the rotten vegetables beneath her 2-inch heels. Queasily, she lifted the neat pleats of her sari and gathered them together, as if to protect their fall lining from falling at their intended position. They already had been at a safe margin, thanks to her 2-inch heels that raised the falls to their soaring heights. As expeditiously as she wanted to get to her home to escape the prying eyes, she found it difficult to tread the slippery path. Verily, she treaded and successfully reached the end of the market street. Her heeled sandals, being wet from the water-laden path, made an oval and a circular impression on the parched cement road, with an inch's indentation separating them. With a soft breeze kissing her forehead, her unevenly grown fringes began to blow apart, obscuring the temples and cheeks of her face. Hard as they tried, they had failed to cover up the huge bindi that adorned her forehead. It would have been a breeze for the soft breeze to camouflage a tilak by working in tandem with the fringes perhaps. The big round red bindi on her forehead appeared to beam with pride and announce with gusto that Mother Nature was helpless too. As she walked by, she was quick to notice a bevy of ladies gossiping away at the front porch of an old and abandoned house that was a furlong away from where the cement pavement ended. Either side of its porch was a haven for gossip mongers who sat and gossiped away under its thatched roof, for children to have fun and frolic, for lazy bugs to daydream, and for destitutes to take shelter under it. As she was approaching towards them, she could sense their prying eyes upon her, peeping out of their niqabs. They appeared to be talking amongst themselves, with their eyeballs following her movement. As they spoke inside their niqabs, the air pushed in and out of their oral cavity, creating a hollow in their clothing. Anjali started to walk briskly, but the sounds of gossip emanating in the form of demeaning words seemed to chase her like a fierce Fido. Mashallah, what a romance! An undying romance that can weave together jute and silk in its passionate hands to produce cashmere silk. Peals of laughter surrounded the air. She continued vehemently, I wonder what other tomfoolery their love can produce. Another voice echoed, She can sport a faux facade to conceal her chameleon colors, but I fear that someday it is going to morph into a fiery veil that can burn hundreds of homes. Couldn't he find a girl from his religion to marry? I wonder as to how easily people can bring a bad name to our religion, sighed another woman. It's because of people like them that there are rumors like love jihad spreading everywhere. They might be truly in love, but they are smart enough to know that romance, especially the one of this kind, has to face a lot of flack. And here they are, having already proved to the world that theirs was an unflinching love. Tears filled Anjali's eyes. She hurriedly took her steps and disappeared from their sight. Nudging time just enough to reach a fortnight back, that sunny afternoon had begun to get dark and cloudy. Gusty winds had started to rumble the leaves of trees, but the sluggishly grown monstrous branches of the giant trees had stood sturdy and unyielding to the winds. That day, Rumana wished she could be as resolute as those branches, strong and tough. The street vendors were famished on time before they hurriedly closed down their pushing carts, laden with colorful and steaming hot aromatic delicacies, and run for cover. The whirlwind was brawny and had started to litter the neatly paved roads without the slightest amount of concern. As Rumana saw people running helter-skelter, she could feel little raindrops settle on her forehead. Yet, she waited nonchalantly in the patio of the restaurant joint. Tried hard but she to refrain herself from drawing analogies to this sudden change. She waited forbearingly at the restaurant in anticipation of Zayan. His absence that past week had put Rumana on tenterhooks, and she was feeling quite a bit under the weather. To add fuel to the fire of quandary, he had kept her at bay from his messages and updates. Her repeated calls had gone unanswered. When anxiety had begun to overbear Rumana's serene demeanor, she was emphatic to drop by her favorite joint where she could wait for him and equally reminisce in their bygone escapades and visit behaviors which in the past had been garnering quite a few glares and stares from the strangers. After reminiscing, she started to chuckle. She at once composed herself, fearing jeers from drifters. Nevertheless, she did not bother to withhold her chuckles even though she had butterflies in her stomach. Minutes flew by. Rumana finished her second cup of cappuccino. She was on the saddle, swiftly moving her dainty fingers on her smartphone, making sure its nuances were in harmony with her prospects. The color of her fingernails matched the background on her smartphone. The jingle of the bangles made Zayan's presence even more palpable. Those were the same green bangles he had bought her from a street adjacent to the mosque on Eid. Suddenly, a manifestation of his handsome image presented itself, ringing to her favorite melancholic tune. Her face lit up. She fathomed it was him. She immediately swiped her smartphone. "Zayan, why didn't you call me? What happened to you?" she asked with a tempo. But there was silence. The deafening silence urged her even more. She began to sound like a broken record. "Maybe it is high time I switched my network," she frowned. An hour passed by, which still had her waiting for Zayan. The next moment, without a hint of dubiousness, she was quick to make out it was his car. For this was the car she had hit several milestones in, going to places unexplored and embarking on adventures that they had never experienced, and everything sober in between that would be etched in her memories forever. The car parked haphazardly a few yards from her, without entering the designated parking lot of the restaurant. An eerie feeling took over her. The tinted glass of the car window obscured her view. After a few minutes, she saw Zayan step out of the car. She had a subdued body language. He closed the door just enough to leave an orifice that faintly revealed his new leather seats. Rumana could not contain herself. She ran towards him and hugged him tightly and reclined on his chest. She could hear the lub-dub rhythms of his racing heart. Her tears of joy moistened his shirt, and her taut arms around him wrinkled the back of his neatly ironed shirt. But she could not sense his grip on her. His hands were stiffly pinned to the sides of his body, and there was silence, a complete silence. Her clairvoyant vision seemed to harbinger the doomsday prophecy that she sometimes feared. "Zayan, what happened? You did not call me," she said as she tugged on to his shirt like an infant. But his inscrutable countenance revealed very little. His body language seemed to reveal ample truths. With his downcast eyes and wrinkly eyebrows, he seemed to be lost. He was sweating profusely, which was ironical, owing to a sullen weather. Her worst fear manifested. Zayan fumbled. "Rumana, I'm sorry, but I couldn't contain my chastity. I married Anjali." Rumana gasped for breath. Her mirror images of experiencing the beneficence of life in unison with him was shattered to bits and pieces. "You rogue! You better not be a deadpan with me," she said. He stood there in silence, a dead silence. She noticed that his face had put on a stolid mask, nowhere ready to reveal himself. She began to feel lightheaded. Retreating him unsteadily, she clutched onto the worn-out and rusty railing behind her. The palms of her clean hands were stained by its corroded paint. Vices of love were rife as always, but they were in defiance of all the rules. A blissful yearning it was for the lovely couple, a yearning they hoped would never cease to be, but always be, like eternally flowing perennial rivers that brought respite even to souls of sinners. Fully wary they were about the pitfalls of falling in love, owing to the moral policing that they had to undergo at every given chance, and being warned of its dangers, which sounded like broken records. Sounds of satirical jargons like love at first sight, divorce at first fight, and love is blind reverberated the walls of their homes. The abominable facet of love was frowned upon by the elderly, who reminisced about how beautiful and committed their arranged marriages were. Similes and metaphors ran amok with how love reared its head like a malevolent serpent and shed its skin of immaculateness and divulged its clear-cut colors of infatuation and lust. After exhausting the power of love, the cranial nerves of the murmuring voices voluntarily conjured up dark images and vehemently ordered scrupulous cops of the society to investigate against love-mongers. But their love passed out in flying colors each time they seemed to turn a deaf ear, unperturbed and eager to prove to the world that their love was genuine and devoid of a shelf life. They were more than happy to remain entangled in its iron shackles. "Till death did them part" was the only impediment. But then, death did not cast its ghastly shadow. Since these Destiny's children were under the cover of her maternal instincts, and she had decided to cradle them in her own sweet ways. Darkness slowly surfaced, and evening prayers from the mosque filled the air. Zayan had just finished his namaz and was standing on the porch when he noticed some commotion. A group of men and women were screaming slogans, holding black and red signboards which read, "Love Jihad is a reality," "Stop feigning love now," and "Stop mass conversion." They came marching towards his house. Minutes later, another group of people emerged from the confines of the street, holding signboards that read phrases like, "Stop bringing bad name to religions," and "Down with religious blasphemy." Rumana, being a social worker in one of the prominent women NGOs, had used their association to her advantage. An innocent spark pleading for help had spread like a wildfire, resulting in communal disharmony. Rumors spread and people began to adjudicate justice according to their mindsets, in their very own law books. A communal tension had surfaced. The situation had gone so bad that police had to take steps to intervene. Number of police vans started showing up in front of Zayan's house. When warnings went unheeded, they had to resort to brandishing the ruckus-creating mob with their long sticks, and when that did not suffice, tear gases were sent in to disperse the mobs. The crowd went berserk, and in a matter of minutes, everything became as silent as a graveyard. The place wore a deserted look, without sight of any souls, with signboards and slippers strewn all over the place, and the air covered in a thick mat of gas. Leaders of communal groups stepped in and through various channels called upon everyone to stay calm and assured them that matters would be sorted out in the confines of law and order. "Speak up! Did you feign love with these two women?" The inspector furiously questioned Zayan. He sternly refused. "This is ludicrous. Then why did you cheat on a Muslim girl and marry a Hindu girl? Speak up!" yelled the inspector, fiercely beating his stick on the table. It was getting crowded inside the gates of the police station. Apparently, vans bearing umpteen number of synonyms of democracy, suffixed by the word TV, with satellite dishes and aerials springing atop their ceilings, showed up. Reporters in their ID tags, impatiently wrestling with their microphones and earpieces, were trying to make way into the crowded police station amidst the roller coaster of push and pulls from the crowd. The police station witnessed a congregation of pious personalities like mullahs, prophets, hadrats, sannyasis and swamis, accompanied by their staunch followers, trying to delve into the depths of this mysterious love triangle. Rumana cried, "Arrest him, sir! I can bear his deceit, but I cannot bear him tarnishing my religion." The inspector raised the palm of his hand as if to quieten her. He continued, "Tell me the truth, and I promise I will try my best to get you out of this mess." A voice from the crowd shouted, pointing to Anjali, "Before you question him, ask her to tell the truth. Allah, who knows if she has been paid to hatch a conspiracy to create communal tension between religions? Question her. She might have feigned love to him too, to bring bad name to both their religions. Maybe she has associations with anti-peace groups." "Stop the rubbish talk," remarked Anjali uncontrollably. No other time was apt for her, except for this very moment when she could pull the skeleton out of her closet. She wanted the fallacious fame to see the light of the day. Anjali elucidated her story. There was complete silence. Rumana's hijab was wet with tears and sweat. News flashed across the television screens and discussions ensued. editorials of the newspapers riveted with the story. Their story was by all means encapsulating. A daring assignment which involved uncovering widespread trafficking in the boroughs of the city had many reporters up in arms, but Zayan had been up for the challenge. With the mission being concluded the following night, he was wrapping up when he had witnessed a group of men with knives chasing a woman in shambles. But she had managed to escape in the dark alleys that were crisscrossing each other. The small village she hailed from had been facing attacks from rebellious groups. Her parents, trying to cross into a safety zone, were killed by their cold-hearted rifles. But somehow Anjali had managed to flee the village, but again found herself wiggling in the far-flung nets of human trafficking. That night, after having escaped from the monsters once more, she had felt that life was much deadlier than death itself. As she was preparing for self-slaughter by tightening the noose of her ragged dupatta, an alert Zayan had sprung into action. He had struck her in an attempt to control her rage, following which she had composed herself and had narrated her story to him. "I am a wretch. I have no reason to live. Show me one soul who can accept me," a devastated Anjali had said before she had ferociously fallen on the stone rubble and had bruised herself. The tenacity of Zayan's profession had stirred his moral conscience to unknown depths. A few days later, Zayan knocked on his door. A woman in a niqab opened the door. Gently lifting her veil, she smiled at him and graciously greeted him with a salam. Zayan was passive. The dargah resonated with soul-stirring melodies of Allahu Akbar on the twilight of Friday. Their story of love jihad had morphed into a serendipity of blessings.